Hello there, welcome back to my channel, Snips by Kelly. I'm Kelly and tonight I have an outdoorsy layout for you here that is a simple layout design created with card kit ingredients. So yes, we're using the famous paper pumpkin, and this is my very first paper pumpkin kit. So I'm opening it up for the very first time. There's a little mini Misty Moonlight pad, and then there's a welcome card, a little stamp set, and the stamp set has some trees and some sentiments, and it looks to me like it's a little bit geared toward Father's Day, which would totally make sense for the May kit since Father's Day is coming up in June. But they give you a little printout that shows those stamps up close and clearer. I think because this is my very first paper pumpkin kit and my very first subscription ever, they give you a starter block. And then I think you keep that block and you use that block for future subscriptions. Then inside, it looks like we have the paper pumpkin kit itself, and it's all pre-packaged. It's going to create 9 cards. Now, I'm actually going to create one of each of those cards, and then I'm going to create a scrapbooking layout. And as you see, if you stay tuned to the end, even more. But there is a QR code where you can actually get a special deal on a stamp set that you could add to this. You can also get refills for only $12, which would create the same amount of cards, but you would use your stamp and your block that came with your original kit and just be able to create 9 more cards for that $12 refill kit. So you can check out those QR codes, and on the QR codes, they walk you through creating this entire kit together. But wow, the visuals will do it. They're so easy. You have, again, the QR code to get a special deal on a special stamp set if you would like to be able to add that to this paper pumpkin kit. They give you dimensional foam pop-ups. You get 9 wood grain envelopes. They give you actually some little 3M adhesives, so you don't even have to have your own tape runner. We have some 3x4 cards, 3 of those. We have 9 different card bases that are already scored and pre-printed. So there's 3 of this really beautiful Misty Moonlight wood grain wash. We have a darker wood grain wash with a little hexagon in it, and then a lighter, more tan color. 3 punch-out trees, and then 3 sets of punch-out flourishes and an extra rectangle. These punch-out really easy. You could snip them apart, or they're going to show you on the cards how you can layer them on top of each other. I like that they're delicate and they're added bits for the cards. And then you have some other punch-outs here. You have some hexagons and then some elongated hexagons and some little pockets or arrow tabs. And so it looks like you have extra, then a couple extra, like 1 extra pocket tab, arrow tab, and then 1 extra hexagon. I'm not exactly sure why you have extra, maybe in case you make a mistake. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put 1 of each of the cards together, and I've actually sped this up quite a bit because it does make the video a little bit long because this is my first kit and I'm brand new to how they do things. But if you're all interested in the 12x12 layout that I create with the leftovers, you can definitely fast forward through the card portion because there's already a video out there by Stampin' Up. If you put your phone up to the little QR code that walks you through creating these together, and the pictures are so easy. So I promise you, after I get these 3 cards together, I'm like nothing to it. These kits are designed for those people that don't want to be collectors. They don't want to have a lot of extra stuff. So all I'm doing is dividing out the pieces according to card 1, card 2, and card 3. Everything is completely labeled. Everything is completely visual. So you can divide out the bits and pieces, and you can just simply go to town and create 3 each of each card design. And you'll have everything you need right in this kit. You don't even need a tape runner because they give you the 3M adhesives. And I'm going to give you my honest opinion of everything when we get to the end. So definitely going to do a little bit of stamping with the mini pad. So of course I have the Misty Moonlight, the full-size pad. And I am more of a collector because I do YouTube videos and I paper craft every day of my life. So the mini pads are absolutely fabulous for people who don't want to be collectors and who want to be able to create this kit without buying one thing extra. So I do struggle with the stamp here a little bit because in Close to My Heart, I'm used to seasoning my stamp. I'm used to stamping on something soft, and I'm used to it, you know, if the stamp doesn't show good coverage through the block, that it doesn't actually stamp that well. So I stamped this many times, wondering if I was going to get good coverage, finding out that I was actually pressing too hard into the ink. So with Stampin' Up! Ink, it's pretty juicy. So you don't have to press down hard into the ink. And the lighter I pressed into the ink, the better coverage I got with the stamp. Also, the stamp doesn't necessarily show full coverage on the photopolymer when you're stamping, and yet you get a good stamp. So that was hard for me at first, but now it's like press lightly. So that little leaf stamp, they just have you stamp all over those. I think those are Misty Moonlight leaves. And so you're just going to take that little leaf stamp and stamp all over it with the stamp pad. You're going to take the stamp pad and ink the edges of the Misty Moonlight rectangle there. You're going to stamp the word sentiment onto the hexagon that's longer. And then, of course, You're the Best There Is goes on the little arrow. And really, aside from some trees that you're going to stamp on the envelopes, that's the only stamping that you need to do for the entire kit. Now, when we get to the layout that I created, the 12 by 12 layout that I created out of the leftovers, we're going to do a little bit more technique, but I really focused on the layout in not having to add much of anything. I added a little extra cardstock and I added a few little bits of bling from my stash, but other than that, I tried really hard to use the contents of the kit without adding anything else. So here I'm struggling again. You can see how many times I've stamped because I'm just not used to not having to push harder or having to make sure that I can see complete coverage on the photopolymer in between. So when I'm stamping here, and I'm looking at the photopolymer, it really doesn't look like I have good coverage, so then I'm too afraid to stamp. So I keep stamping on scrap paper because I'm really worried that it's not going to stamp okay, and it actually ends up stamping great. So I just needed to trust the process of a new type of stamp, that maybe this photopolymer doesn't attract the ink as deeply, and so the ink is more on the surface, so it actually stamps fine, but doesn't look deep when you look through the block. And that's just me getting bonded with the stamps. But if anyone else who's used to Close to My Heart, it's very different. So I'm stamping in a different way with these Stampin' Up! Stamps than I do with Close to My Heart. So I'm pushing into the ink a lot more lightly. I'm not worrying quite as much about full coverage on the stamp before I stamp. Now that being said, I'm still stamping off because I'm paranoid. So I'm stamping off first, especially when you're stamping directly onto an envelope or directly onto a piece and you don't have another piece to replace it. So it's stamping really beautifully. It's working really great. And I love the trees. I love the sentiments. And again, it's really geared more toward Father's Day here. So they give you all of the foam dots you need, all of the adhesive you need. So my honest review is how fabulous. This would be so amazing for my daughter who doesn't want to buy a bunch of blocks, a bunch of stamps, a bunch of inks, a bunch of adhesives, a bunch of tape runners. However, for me, I don't want to peel off each little 3M circle to get the adhesive on my pieces. I'm used to using a tape runner and just zip, zip, done. And so with the 3M pieces, as generous as it is and as perfect as it is for a brand new beginning paper crafter and also a minimalist, somebody who's a minimalist that really doesn't want to have to buy tape runners, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect for that. But for me, who wants to just grab a tape runner and zip zing, or grab a roll of foam tape, zip zing, I would much rather do that. I would also much rather use my full-size stamp pad than a small little stamp pad. But if you are not a collector and you don't want to buy stamp pads, these little minis are absolutely perfect and they do the job. They do everything that you need them to do. So basically you can see here, I'm just looking at the pictures, adding foam tape to the backs of things, adding the 3M adhesive circles to the backs of things, and just assembling these cards exactly as the directions say. I'm not adding anything, I'm not zhuzhing anything up, and I absolutely love the cards. I think they're perfect, they're fast, they're easy, and I feel like the materials are thick enough, they're good quality, like the punch outs to me were not flimsy, the envelopes are really nice, the cardstock, the pre-printed cardstock bases are nice and thick, they're scored really, really well. So my review of the actual quality is stellar. I really think it's excellent quality, the amount of pieces that you get in a kit for the cost, and I'll post and link in the description how you get a subscription to Paper Pumpkin. You can do a 1 month, a 3 month, I think there's a 6 month, and then a 12 month. And of course the 12 month is the least expensive, and I believe, don't quote me on this, I will put it in the description, but I believe you get free shipping on the 12 months. So that makes it an even better deal. And it comes out to be around, I think it's around $25 a month for the kits. And then you get all different things, themes, and you have the ability to skip a month if there's a particular one that you're not interested in, and then get a different month. You can buy refill kits as they're available. So the refill kits are $12, which is a steal. So if you do want to go forward as we get past the cards here and see what I've created with the leftovers, I actually created two-page layouts out of the leftovers. And had I not created the cards, I definitely could have gotten a minimum of 3 2-page layouts, and I would not have been surprised if I could have gotten 4 2-page layouts out of the contents of this kit. I really kept it pattern oriented for my first try because I really didn't know how the materials were going to stretch, what the materials look like. So the layout that I make is quite pattern oriented. It's a go-to layout that you've seen around many, many times. And then I actually go on to create a second video for another layout. So with this particular kit, all of the ingredients, I created 2 2-page layouts and 3 cards with plenty of leftovers. So that's kind of just giving you an indication of how much product is in one of the Paper Pumpkin kits for that price each month. So I will definitely be sharing more of Paper Pumpkin because I did purchase the subscription, and I will be doing a Paper Pumpkin Plus group for those people who purchase the subscription, the Paper Pumpkin subscription for me. I'll have a little group where we create, obviously, pages out of Paper Pumpkin. I'm not saying that we're never going to create cards, but we're going to stretch the kit into pages because that's my thing. And so that'll be launching actually in July, because here in June, I'm finishing up a current club, and my current club cycle ends here in June. And then in July, I'll be starting all new programs that will be Stampin' Up! Specific. So I'm so excited for that. So as you can see, if you've been watching me while I'm yakking, I'm finishing here on the last card. I've created 3 cards identical to the way that they wanted them made made, the way that they designed them. And I am telling you, I have seen Stampin' Up! Demonstrators especially, but as of late, close to my heart, former close to my heart makers turned Stampin' Up! Demonstrators do phenomenal things with these kits. I've seen phenomenal layouts, and I've seen the most elevated cards. I've seen cards that were turned into 3D cards and cards that have mechanics and all kinds of incredible, incredible things. Really, really amazing. So here's those 3 cards as is with no changes. So after creating those 3 cards with those 3 envelopes, look at everything that we have left over. Holy cow! We have plenty to work with. So of course, we still have 2 envelopes and 2 of each of 3 bases. We still have 2 different sets of 3x4 pocket cards. We still have all the ingredients that we would have used to make 6 more cards, right? Because we made only 3. So there are 2 additional pieces of those arrows and that elongated hexagon. But I am actually going to scrap a trip to the Badlands National Park. We don't live very far from the Badlands National Park. The ranch is quite a ways, but our house in town is very, very close, maybe a 26-minute drive cutting across gravel. But this is my daughter, my middle child, my daughter, and her 3 daughters, Ramsey, Kate, Hattie, Elaine, and Avery Jean. And we took a girl day to the Badlands National Park and we did some climbing. Now, if you've ever learned about the Badlands National Park, it is badlands, it is pinnacles and valleys, and it is some of the most amazing rock formations and natural grasses. And I will talk a little bit more about that here to come, but I've actually opened up a package of neutrals. This is Night of Navy in the neutrals cardstock, and I've gutted a piece of 12 by 12 Night of Navy, and I've gutted it out by cutting it from 1 inch to 11 inches all the way around. Then I've actually grabbed another neutral, which is crumb cake, and I've cut that to 11 inches, and then I gutted that out as well by cutting from 1 inch to 10 inches all the way around. And the only reason that I gutted it was to be able to conserve the paper in the middle. Then I'm going to use a 10.5 by 10.5 white. So I've doubled that for both the left page and the right page. And then I've actually created a 1/8 inch photo mat for each of my photos. Now, when you look at these card bases, and I was trying to figure this out, of course, they're 4 1/4 by 5.5. So I'm going to do a very basic pattern-oriented layout for my first try because I'm a newbie at Paper Pumpkin. And so I really just want to draw from all of the patterns that I've used in the past. Close to My Heart was amazing at patterns and pattern books. They also offered patterns and directions for every single workshop that they ever created. So this is a go-to. I don't know where the original pattern came from, but it's a pattern that I've used for years. I'm assuming it came from Close to My Heart. And so I've done the math, and I'm making each square 2 1/8 by 2 1/8 because then it's going to fit really nicely in my 10.5 by 10.5 white, and it's going to cut super nicely and help me conserve paper because half of 4 1/4 is 2 1/8, and then you have 5.5 inches long, so you're able to get 4 squares out of each half of a card base. So I'm cutting quite a few here, and I'll end up giving you the final answer. We don't really need all of them, but I'm going to show you here. I'm cutting the envelope as well. I feel like I can use that envelope top for something later, and I actually do, but I'm going to do the same thing with the envelope. I'm going to cut 2 1/8 inch squares. I'm just kind of looking at it to decide if I want to tear it apart or just cut it. I'm going to be able to use a portion of the backside in 2 1/8 inch squares, and then a portion of it that was the envelope top I won't be able to use for that, but I actually do find a use for it later later. So I'm cutting 2 1/8 inch squares out of one of the envelopes. I'm cutting 2 1/8 inch squares out of 1/2 of each of the card bases, and I do end up using the other side of some of the card base as well. So I didn't cut into the extra pieces needed to create the other cards in the kit. So I used the materials to create 3 of the cards, and now I'm just cutting into another card basically. And so I don't know how much is going to be left over and how much I'm going to need, but I'm just going to get as many squares as I can out of one envelope and one each of the card bases. So let's see how we do. I still have the other sides of those card bases, so I'll be reserving those in case we need those. And I'm envisioning creating the squares in a diamond and making a little diamond grid. I do end up cutting some of the diamonds in half and rearranging them because we don't need to cover up the spaces that are going to be covered up. So I have a horizontal 5x7 photo, a vertical 4x6 photo, and 2 vertical 4x6 photos, or 3x4 photos. And I've made a 1/8 inch white background for each of those, and I chose white because of the girls' white t-shirts, and they have white t-shirts on, and they also have some browns on, and they actually have a little bit of, I think it's a summer splash that's in some of the little flourishes there. It's hard for me to know all of the colors, but it looks like they have wild wheat, summer splash, and then maybe misty moonlight in those leaves. And so I'm basically just kind of figuring out which ones I can cut in half, which ones aren't going to show, which ones I don't have to put in place. Now, sometimes when I create layouts like this, I will actually create some white squares as fillers because sometimes it does help keep me straight, because I do get a little wonky because I'm not using any fillers. And so if you wanted to make some 2 1/8 by 2 1/8 white squares, and that way you don't waste your pattern pieces or your cardstock pieces, but it also helps you kind of keep everything in line. So right now I'm just kind of laying it out and seeing what's going to work here, and seeing if I can get the pieces to work and how many more pieces I might need for the right page. I actually will pull this apart and show you what's left. Now I end up with quite a bit of tan, so I'm going to cut into that second card base here, the one that I'm assuming is, I think it's kind of Night of Navy or Misty Moonlight, and so I'm assuming it is. Now, if you are using Close to My Heart colors, Night of Navy is like our sapphire, and then for Misty Moonlight, there's a couple ways you could go. Some people say periwinkle, but I'm even thinking mist would work well for that. It's kind of like maybe not something that is identical, but something that would be very complementary. You could totally use that. So for boho blue, they say periwinkle, and I don't think they really say anything for Misty Moonlight. I'm looking here at my cheat sheet, and I don't see anything really, but I think mist would work. I do think periwinkle would work, although for my photos that had a little bit too much purple in it. And then of course crumb cake you could get by with toffee. So there's lots and lots of colors that you could use in Close to My Heart that you could substitute that would work great here. So now I'm again using some fillers. I end up wasting some of these squares, and I'll probably use them on something else, but I didn't need all of these, and I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. So that's the reason that I figure it all out for you, so that I'm the one that has the waste and you don't. And so sometimes I think about those things that we have that are closer to home, like the Badlands National Park really starts not very far from our home and goes almost all the way to the Black Hills. It's literally 243,000 acres of preserved land, and it's a combination effort from like the the National Park Services and the Oglala Lakota tribe. And so there's lots and lots of protected land in there. And there are so many trails from really, really hard to really, really easy. Some of the trails have actually man-made pathways and railings, but then there's also those that don't. And boy, if you wanted to hike, you could hike. So the hike that we actually did on this day was a notch trail, and you go up a staircase, or like a staircase in the land, and you get into a ridge, and it absolutely takes you up to the highest of heights and through the most beautiful views. So as you can see here, I'm still working on sorting everything out, and I'll show you here when I get all done so you can see exactly how many squares of each I have. They're just all 2 1/8 inches. And so there you go. You can see I have the whole ones on top, and you can hit pause on the video and you can see exactly how many I used and how I laid those down in the background. And all I really did is remove the ones that weren't going to show, cut the ones in half that I felt like I could cut in half. And actually, as I have things in place, I realized I could have probably used even less by the time I do the embellishing and the decorating. So we had a great time. The day before, we went into the Black Hills, and we actually went to a place called Jewel Cave, which is another national monument that is preserved. And we spent about 2 hours deep down in the caves, walking and hiking through the caves, and it's incredible. It's a great experience if you're ever in the Black Hills. And I did that with actually 5 of the grandkids, and then my daughter and her 3 little girls stayed a little longer, and we did this little hiking trip through the Badlands. Now, I actually cut in half some of the hexagons, all of the remaining hexagons that came in the kit, and I thought it would be really neat to jazz up the squares, do some stamping and some journaling in, and I didn't even make sure that they were perfectly in half. If some of them were a little less than half and some of them were a little more than half, that was okay with me, so that it didn't have to look super symmetrical. There's lots of little bits here. So we have the leaf flourish bits, and we have the circle with the trees on it. We also have the tree stamp. So I think we can make some more trees with this. There's great plenty to work with. I do love that pocket card, so I trimmed off the top of that 3x4 pocket card, and I actually end up cutting it more because I can't reconcile it. Like, I want to use it, but I'm not really figuring out a way to use it where it flows and it makes a nice cluster. So I'm going to show you something that I do here in just a little bit to make that work. I'm just experimenting with the direction of the arrows, maybe making those arrows opposite each other, and then maybe doing that same thing in the left page, making those arrows either going upward or kind of being the opposite of each other, just to create a little bit of a visual play and some fun. There's plenty of stuff to cluster with. So here's that little leftover piece of my envelope that was an odd shape, and I actually stamped the trees on that, and then I did it again on another little scrap of envelope, and I think that's going to work great. So the stamp says, "You're the best there is," and I thought that's perfect for a little sentiment on this page, because I feel that way about my girls. I also feel that way about the national park. It's the best. Any national park, for people who are park hoppers, it's just an experience. I don't mean to be a weirdo, but it's an experience close to God. Most natural wonders of the world just are so breathtaking in so many different ways that it takes you back to nature. You can decompress. So we did have if you can believe it, we had cell service out there. And the reason that we did bring the phone, aside from the obvious taking pictures, is the girls have an app called Seek. So there's a lot of prairie grasses, not so much in the photos that I'm showing here, but there are a lot lot of prairie grasses that grow and a lot of wild plants that are, specific to the Badlands. And there's an app called Seek, and I believe it does animals and places also. But if you take a photo, it will go into its database and it will find the plant species and all of this incredible information about the plants, whether it's poisonous and how it grows and the climate it needs and the family that it comes from. And it's just so crazy. So if you're somewhere where you don't have service, you can take a picture of the plant or the animal or the location, and you can upload it later into Seek and it will give you that same information. So it's pretty incredible. So we could stop along the way, open up and take the photo, and it would tell us exactly what the plants were that we were walking by. And I love that. And it does that for animals as well. So my granddaughters are very into a lot of different things. And the one granddaughter in the middle, Hattie Elaine, she's really into geography. So she will use the atlas and the map, and she will use locations, and she loves like just all kinds of things, rivers, bodies of waters, oceans. Oh my gosh, it's hard to even have a conversation with her. She's so into it and she knows so much, and I'm not smarter than a fifth grader. So actually she's not fifth grade yet, but she will be. And so I'm actually cutting apart the little hills in this pocket card, putting 2 more clusters of trees there, and I end up pulling that off and popping up the layers with foam tape to create a little scene there. Like, it just wasn't reconciling with me because there was a sharp edge of the card on the left-hand side and then that sharp edge of the card on the right-hand side, and there wasn't really any height. So I just cut that apart to make a little cluster and a little scene by using both adhesive and foam tape, and I love it now. It created this whole little scene, and it almost looks exactly like it was made for the Badlands. Some dry little trees coming out of it, some trees that actually have some greenery on it, some native grasses coming out of it, and then lots and lots of pinnacles, like eroded buttes, and all kinds of mixed prairie grasses. There's endangered mammals in there. There's a black-footed ferret that is endangered in there, and it's a really big area where the Oglala Lakota tribe uses that, and they do all kinds of native rituals and different things that are important to them and their culture. And there's some different things that they did do filming in there, like for Dances with Wolves and Thunderheart and some of those. And of course, you can learn all about the treaties and treaties that were broken as well. And so you can learn a lot by visiting that national park. So as you can see, I'm just playing, I'm working on my clusters. I'm going to use this little leaf and second generation stamping or stamping off. So I'm just creating a little bit of stamping underneath the flourishes, doing a little bit of ink rubbing with the ink that came right in the stamp, doing that second generation stamping with that little leaf flourish stamp that comes right in the kit. Use what we have. So the reason I'm using more pattern oriented pages here for my first try is I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if there was going to be enough of pieces in the kit to create 1 layout, 2 layouts, 3 layouts, and because nothing is very large, because nothing is over card size, I didn't know how I was going to create pieces to pages and how it was going to work out. And as you can see, it's working out fabulous. So Close to My Heart's closing left a really big hole for me in terms of patterns, because Close to My Heart has years and years worth of pattern books, and they also offered patterns right in their kit. Now Stampin' Up! Is coming, so their very first Stampin' Up! Created workshop kit, 12 by 12 workshop kit that's coming in September, is going to have instructions in it. Now you're going to see me do something crazy here. I have a 1-inch circle punch, and I'm actually punching out some little pieces to give me some extra bits. Now, do I need these extra bits? No. Do I like having extra bits? Yes. And so if you don't have a circle punch because again, I'm not wanting people who are buying a paper pumpkin to purchase a lot of things. These rounder things, you can simply cut them out. You could cut them out as a square. You could cut them out as a circle. Some of the things that are already round that are in the instructions sheet, you could just fussy cut around them with the scissors. If they're not already round, you could actually cut around all the different shapes. Like the shape that I'm cutting out right now with the leaves, you could actually cut that triangle out and fussy cut around those leaves. It's quite thin, but it doesn't matter once it's on your page. You could also turn it into a sticker by adding a sticky back adhesive to it. You could also adhere it to cardstock and then cut around the cardstock or punch out around the cardstock to make it nice and thick. But it just gives extra little pieces that were otherwise going to be thrown away. So sometimes I feel like a little scavenger, and I'm just always looking for little extra bits and pieces that I could add to add extra interesting elements to pages. And so you can see how I've used it here, just a couple little circles to add some added elements to the squares, a couple little circles here, and then I'm going to use a blending brush and do a little bit of inking and actually show a little splatter painting that is totally optional, but because they give us the stamp pad right in the kit, we might as well add water and see what happens. So let's just get these little pieces in place. So when I was punching that out, I got a little raw edge that wasn't very even, so I'm having to strategically place that. So wow, I'm getting happier. I'm not happy yet, but I'm getting happier. There's a lot of other things you could do. You could add journaling lines around the edges of some of the squares with a black Le Pen. And now again, I'm kind of rubbing off with the Misty Moonlight onto scrap paper and then rubbing just a little bit strategically onto a few little spots to add a little added interest. Again, if you don't want to add to your paper pumpkin subscription by adding a blending brush, I don't want to say this because it might look a little chunky, but you could experiment with this on where if you tipped your stamp pad over and gently rubbed or used a cotton ball or a tissue, you probably could get a similar effect. I'm thinking out of all of those options, just a cotton ball that you would find pretty much have as an everyday item in your home would totally work. So what I'm doing here is I've pressed that stamp pad into a wipeable mat and I'm squeezing a little water into it. I happen to have a water brush and I'm just tapping on and making a few little sprinkles. And so I think you could definitely do this with a household object. I'm thinking you could do this by brushing it onto the back of a spoon and then tapping the spoon, or brushing it onto one end, a skinnier end of a spoon, some kind of a utensil like a writing utensil. You could brush it onto and tap it off. Anything that would just collect droplets of water that you could then tap off if you're not wanting to invest in products. So the purpose of paper pumpkin, according to Stampin' Up, was for the minimalist and for the very first level of paper crafters. So you have the paper crafters that have no supplies and don't want to invest in a ton of supplies, and the kits are all inclusive. So the kits, the Stampin' Up kits, as well as the Stampin' Up paper pumpkin are the two that are the most basic level paper crafters in Stampin' Up. And it's designed for them to open up that kit and put everything together, and they don't even need adhesive. The adhesive comes right in it. So I've decided to add some bling here to it. Again, you don't have to, but if you do have some bling from your stash, these are the adhesive back textured dots. And I felt like these were outdoorsy, these were masculine, and the colors went perfect. So there you have it. I'm getting happy. So I'm loving this. I love love that it's a basic pattern. And like I was saying before, we don't have the pattern books anymore other than if you've invested in those in Close to My Heart. So I do know that Creative Design Team, CDT, Creative Design Team on YouTube, puts out pattern books. So you could check those out if you're interested in up and coming pattern books. Hopefully Stampin' Up! Will have pattern books soon. Now, stay tuned. My next video, I take all of the leftovers from what we've created here with the 3 cards and the 1 layout, and I make an additional layout, and I give my honest review of the paper pumpkin kit as a whole. I hope you enjoyed the paper pumpkin layout as well as the cards. Hit subscribe, the notifications bell, so you don't miss any future things happening here on Snips by Kelly.